The wealthy don't just eat at Aurelia. They go there to be worshipped. And the object of their deepest terror and devotion was Madeleine Hartford. She was a woman sculpted from ice and old money, capable of ending a career with a single, whispered complaint. The staff moved around her like skittish animals until the day Callie Sullivan started her shift. Callie was new, she was observant, and she didn't know she was supposed to be afraid. What started as a simple correction over a glass of wine would end in the complete public dismantling of a dynasty. The silence in Aurelia wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the silence of a cathedral, where any sound above a reverent whisper felt like a sin. The clink of solid silver against porcelain was surgically precise. The clientele, draped in designer fabrics and quiet jewels, spoke in low, conspiratorial tones. This wasn't a restaurant, it was a stage, and everyone, from the busboys to the millionaires, knew their part. Callie Sullivan, on her third day, felt like she'd been cast in a play without being given the script. "You're polished, Callie. I'll give you that," Mr. Davies, the restaurant manager, had told her during her interview. His suit was so perfectly tailored, it looked like armor. But being polished here is just the baseline. Our clientele, they don't just expect service. They expect anticipation. They expect invisibility. You are a ghost who brings them wine. Callie needed this job. The tips at a place like Aurelia were rumored to be enough to cover a semester's tuition in a single month. She was saving up to finish her art history degree, a dream that had been deferred by family medical bills. She could be a ghost. She could be whatever they needed. On her fourth day, Jasper, a senior waiter with haunted eyes and the fastest hands Callie had ever seen, pulled her aside by the gleaming espresso machine. "You're getting section 3 tonight," he murmured, not looking at her, his hands already polishing a glass that was, by all appearances, flawless. "Okay. Is that bad?" Jasper finally stopped and met her gaze. "Mrs. Hartford is at table 12, section 3. Callie waited. The name meant nothing to her. Jasper let out a low, humorless huff. "You're new. Okay. Listen to me, Callie. Do not make conversation. Do not make eye contact for more than 1 second. Your job is to agree. If she tells you the sky is green, you ask her if she would prefer it in a shade of emerald or lime. She's just a customer, Jasper." "No," he said, his voice dropping so low Callie had to lean in. "She's the woman who got Thomas fired. Thomas was the best sommelier we ever had. Knew more about wine than any man in New York. Mrs. Hartford was pontificating about a specific Burgundy, a 98 Romanée Conti, and Thomas gently corrected a date she mentioned. Just a tiny, polite clarification." Callie felt a chill. What happened? She smiled at him, thanked him. The next day, Mr. Hartford's holding company, which owns half the block, threatened to buy out our lease and terminate it. Mr. Davies was white-faced. Thomas was gone by dinner service. She didn't just get him fired from here, Callie. She had him blacklisted. I heard he's a greeter at a Costco in New Jersey now. Callie swallowed, the air in the immaculate dining room suddenly feeling thin. "Got it. Sky is green." "And for God's sake," Jasper added, turning back to his glasses, "never ever let her water glass fall below the halfway mark. She calls it a sign of profound neglect." Callie nodded, adjusting her crisp black apron. She was a ghost. She could do this. She glanced toward table 12, a plush velvet booth in the corner that offered a panoramic view of the entire room. A woman sat there, ramrod straight, her silver blonde hair pulled into a chignon so tight it looked painful. She was wearing a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost more than Callie's car. She wasn't speaking to the man opposite her, a handsome, if tired-looking, man in a bespoke suit. She was just watching. Her eyes, a pale, cold blue, scanned the room with an air of profound, bored disappointment. This was Madeline Hartford, and she was, Callie realized, the queen of this opulent, silent, terrifying stage. The man opposite her, her husband, Arthur Hartford, idly stirred his espresso, looking like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be relaxed. Callie picked up her silver water pitcher, the metal cold against her palm. It was time to enter the dragon's lair. Callie approached table 12, as if stepping onto thin ice. The rules replayed in her mind. No eye contact. Agree. Keep the water full. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hartford. My name is Callie, and I will be your server. Arthur Hartford gave her a brief, distracted nod, his eyes on his spoon. Madeline, however, didn't look at her. She continued to scan the room, as if Callie were nothing more than a sudden, mildly annoying draft. After a beat of silence, so long it became a statement, Madeline finally turned her head, her movement slow and deliberate. Her gaze didn't land on Callie's face, but rather on her apron. "Callie," she said. Her voice was low and smooth, like velvet sliding over glass. "You're new. I haven't seen you before." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes, ma'am. This is my first week," Callie replied, keeping her voice neutral and pleasant. "I see." Madeline's eyes flicked up to Callie's. "We'll see if you last the month." She snapped her menu shut. Arthur flinched slightly at the sound. "I will have the Dover sole," Madeline announced, "pan-seared. But the chef must understand that I want the butter clarified at precisely 165 degrees, not 160, which he seems to prefer." 165. "It makes the nuttiness more pronounced, and I want the capers from Pantelleria, not the common Sicilian ones. You will ensure the kitchen understands the difference?" Callie felt a tiny, imperceptible twitch at her temple. This was a test, a ridiculous, impossible test, designed to make her fail. "Of course, Mrs. Hartford," Callie said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Dover sole, butter clarified at 165 degrees with capers from Pantelleria. A wonderful choice." Madeline's eyes narrowed. She was expecting stammering, or apologies, or frantic note-scribbling. She was not expecting calm, professional validation. "And for you, Mr. Hartford?" Callie turned to the husband. "Ah," Arthur said, startled. He hadn't even opened his menu. I'll have the filet, medium, and a glass of their 17 Cabernet, the Stag's Leap." "A very good year, sir," Callie nodded, collecting the menus. As she turned to leave, Madeline's voice cut through the air again. "Oh, and Callie." Callie paused, turning back. "Yes, ma'am." "This water," Madeline said, gesturing to her glass. "It's tepid. I expect ice. Crushed, not cubed. And a single thin slice of lemon. No pulp." "Immediately, Mrs. Hartford." Callie walked away, her back straight, her breathing even. She could feel Madeline Hartford's eyes on her, a physical weight on her shoulders. When she reached the service station, Jasper was there, pretending to organize napkins. 165-degree butter and Pantellerian capers, he whispered, his lip twitching. "And crushed ice with a pulp-free lemon slice," Callie whispered back, grabbing a new glass. "She's testing you. She wants you to run to the kitchen, flustered, and have Chef Dubois laugh in your face. We don't have Pantellerian capers." "I know," Callie said, "but the chef will be informed of her preference." "And the butter?" "I'll tell him 165. What he does with that information is between him and God. My job is to agree." Jasper almost smiled. "You're learning." Callie returned with the water. She placed it down silently, the crushed ice and perfect lemon slice exactly as requested. Madeline watched her every move. Callie then refilled Arthur's water glass, which was just below the halfway mark. The rest of the meal was a masterclass in tension. Callie was a perfect ghost. She anticipated their needs, refilling glasses before they were empty, clearing plates the second they were finished, never intruding, never speaking unless spoken to. The entire time, Madeline watched her. It was a cold, reptilian scrutiny. She was looking for a flaw, a fingerprint on a fork, a drop of water on the tablecloth, a single hair out of place. Callie gave her nothing. When the check was presented, Arthur signed it quickly, not even looking at the total. As Callie was about to retrieve it, Madeline placed her hand on the leather folder. "You're very composed," Madeline said, the word sounding like an insult. "Thank you, ma'am. We aim to provide a seamless experience," Callie replied. "We'll see," Madeline said, her voice a purr. There's a fine line between seamless and insubordinate. You'd do well to remember that. She removed her hand. Callie took the check, gave a slight nod, and walked away. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until she was back in the kitchen, the stainless steel of the pass cool against her forehead. She had survived. But she also knew, with a sinking certainty, that this wasn't over. She hadn't just served Madeline Hartford. She had annoyed her. And in Madeline's world, being annoyed was grounds for war. 2 weeks passed. Callie had, against all odds, lasted the month. She had mastered the art of being invisible armor. She served the Hartfords 3 more times. Each time, Madeline's demands grew more specific, more esoteric, and more designed to be impossible. She requested bread warmed by the residual heat of the pizza oven, not toasted. She insisted her espresso be pulled from beans ground no more than 2 minutes prior to brewing. Callie met every demand with unnerving, unflappable politeness. She relayed the orders to the kitchen, and Chef Dubois, a volatile Frenchman who respected professionalism above all, had begun to develop a grudging admiration for her. "She is a dragon, this Hartford," he'd mutter. "But this new girl, La Petite, she has a spine of steel. She does not flinch, so we give her the 2-minute coffee." Callie's calm was becoming a quiet legend among the staff, but it was also winding the spring on Madeline Hartford tighter and tighter. Madeline was a predator who enjoyed the chase, the fear, the moment her prey stumbled. Callie refused to stumble. Then came the night of the Vanderveer reception. Madeline was not just dining, she was holding court. Table 12 had been extended to seat 8. She was joined by other lions of the city's social scene, women whose names were carved onto museum wings and charity boards. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the brittle sound of competitive laughter. Callie was assigned the table, much to Mr. Davies's visible anxiety. "Mrs. Hartford requested you," he'd hissed, which Callie knew was not a compliment. It was a challenge. The dinner was progressing, slowly and perilously. Callie was a phantom, her movements precise. Then Madeline began to talk about the Hartfords' recent trip to France. "Of course, Arthur and I were in Bordeaux," Madeline said, her voice carrying across the hushed restaurant. The other tables instinctively quieted, straining to hear. "We had a private tasting at Cheval Blanc, utterly divine. They opened a 47 for us. Imagine." There was a collective, impressed sigh from her guests. The 47 Cheval Blanc was a legend, one of the most mythical and expensive wines in existence. "The notes," Madeline continued, closing her eyes in performative ecstasy. "They were astonishing. Beyond the usual blackcurrant and deep mocha, there were high notes of Arctic raspberry, a flavor that only comes from that very specific, very cold summer. It was transcendent. Callie was standing near the table, holding a heavy bottle of Sancerre, about to refill a guest's glass. She froze. Her mind flashed back to her childhood. Her father, before he lost everything, hadn't just been a collector. He had been a scholar of wine. He had taught her to listen to it. And the 47 Cheval Blanc. That was his holy grail. He had talked about it, read tasting notes to her like bedtime stories. And he had been very, very specific about its profile. Callie's training, her need to be a ghost, screamed at her. Pour the wine. Say nothing. The sky is green. But then Madeleine laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. It's so dull, isn't it, when people claim to be experts but have clearly never actually tasted it. They read some dusty old book. But until you've had that Arctic raspberry on your tongue, you simply don't know. One of the other women, a Mrs. Sinclair, nodded vigorously. You are so right, Madeleine. That's the difference. Authenticity. Something inside Callie snapped. It was the condescension. It was the lie. It was the memory of her father, a true expert, now stocking shelves while this fraud held court. My apologies, Mrs. Hartford, Callie said. The voice was hers, but it felt disconnected. It was quiet, but it sliced through the conversation like a razor. The entire table, and several nearby, went utterly silent. Madeleine turned her head, her smile freezing on her face. I'm sorry? My apologies, Callie repeated, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her voice uncannily steady. She did not make eye contact, instead focusing on a point just past Madeleine's shoulder. I must have misheard you, but the 1947 Cheval Blanc, it's celebrated for its almost port-like density. The official tasting notes from the chateau itself describe it as having gushing notes of fig, baked plum, and a hint of tobacco. It's famously volatile. Callie took a small breath. This was the point of no return. The Arctic raspberry note you mentioned, that's the signature marker of the 1953 Margot, not the 47 Cheval Blanc. They are from entirely different appellations. She finished. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was a vacuum. Mrs. Sinclair's wine glass, which she had been raising to her lips, stopped halfway. Arthur Hartford, at the other end of the table, looked up from his plate, his eyes wide, a flicker of something, was it panic, flashing across his face. Madeleine Hartford's face was a mask of placid fury. The blood drained from it, leaving her looking like a marble statue. Then, slowly, a dangerous, deep crimson began to crawl up her neck. She had been corrected. No, she had been exposed by a waitress, in front of everyone. Callie Sullivan, the ghost, had just become the most visible person in the room. And she had, in front of her most devoted worshippers, made Madeleine Hartford look utterly, completely ridiculous. The rest of the dinner was served in a silence so cold it could have caused frostbite. Madeleine did not speak another word. She sat, ramrod straight, her mouth a thin, white line. Her guests, terrified, ate their food with mechanical movements, their eyes darting anywhere but at Callie or their hostess. Callie continued her duties. She refilled water. She cleared plates. Her professionalism was now, in itself, an act of defiance. By not grovelling, not bursting into tears, or not simply evaporating on the spot, she was compounding the humiliation. When the Hartfords finally left, Madeleine sweeping past Mr. Davies without a word, Arthur trailed behind her. But just before he exited, he paused. He looked back at Callie, who was clearing the wreckage of the table. Their eyes met for a full second. He didn't look angry. He looked assessing, almost impressed. Then he was gone. The second the door closed, Mr. Davies descended on Callie. In my office. Now. He was shaking, his usual sartorial perfection marred by a sheen of sweat on his brow. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he hissed once the door was closed. "I corrected a customer's statement, Mr. Davies." "You didn't correct her. You humiliated her. You humiliated Madeline Hartford in her own restaurant. Do you think this is a debate club? Do you think your opinion on wine matters?" "She was stating a falsehood as fact, sir. This is a high-end establishment. I assumed facts mattered here." "Facts?" Davies laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "The only fact that matters is that the Hartford's patronage pays your salary. It pays my salary. She will ruin us. She will ruin me." "So I'm fired," Callie said. It wasn't a question. "Fired?" Davies looked at her, and a strange, calculating expression replaced his panic. "Oh no, you're not fired. Firing you would be too easy. She told me not to fire you." Callie felt a knot of dread in her stomach. "What?" "She wants you to stay. She wants you to wait on her. Exclusively." This was worse. This wasn't a firing. This was a sentence. She was to be the dragon's personal toy. "She wants to break you, Miss Sullivan," Davies said, his voice flat. "She wants to make an example of you, and you will let her. You will show up every day, and you will take every table she books, and you will endure whatever she decides to inflict on you. Or you can quit. And I will personally see to it that you never serve so much as a cup of coffee in this city again. Am I clear?" "Yes, Mr. Davies." The next few weeks were a quiet, specialized form of torture. Madeleine came in every day, sometimes for lunch, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for a single, meticulously demanding cup of tea. She brought her most difficult friends. She sent back dishes for imagined flaws. She would make Callie stand by the table and describe, in excruciating detail, the origin of every ingredient in the salad. She would accidentally drop a knife, forcing Callie to retrieve it. She would time, on her diamond-encrusted watch, how long it took for her water to be refilled. But Callie didn't break. She was calm, she was polite, she was perfect. She fetched the knife. She recited the provenance of the heirloom tomatoes. She refilled the water in under 10 seconds. With every day she survived, Madeleine's frustration grew. It radiated from her in cold waves. She was failing to break her. And all the while, Callie noticed something. Arthur Hartford. He was there at almost every meal, silent. He never participated in his wife's casual cruelty. He just watched. He watched his wife, and he watched Callie. Callie began to see the cracks in his tired husband facade. She saw the way his hand tightened on his fork when Madeleine delivered a particularly sharp insult. She saw the way his eyes tracked Callie's movements, not with the predatory gaze of the other wealthy men, but with a strange, unreadable intensity. He wasn't just a passenger, he was an observer. He was waiting for something. One evening, as Callie was setting their table, Arthur arrived first, which was unusual. Madeleine was still in the powder room. As Callie laid down the silverware, Arthur spoke, his voice so low she almost missed it. "You're very brave," he murmured, not looking at her. Callie paused, her hand hovering over a wine glass. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Hartford." "No," he said. He looked up, and his eyes were clear and desperate. "You're not. You're surviving her. Nobody does that." Before Callie could process this, the hushed tones of the restaurant shifted. The temperature dropped. Madeleine had returned. Arthur immediately looked down at his menu, his brief moment of connection vanishing as if it had never happened. But Callie had seen it. The man wasn't just tired. He was terrified, and he had just signaled in the clearest way possible that he was not her enemy. he was a fellow prisoner. The encounter broke the spell. Callie was no longer just a victim of Madeleine's campaign. She was a participant in a much more complex drama. She began to observe the Hartfords, not as a server, but as an analyst. She saw how Madeleine controlled everything. She tasted Arthur's wine before letting him drink it, to ensure it's not corked, though it was clearly an assertion of dominance. She answered questions directed at him. She would subtly mock his opinions in front of their friends. "Oh, Arthur, you and your simple ideas. It's charming, really." Arthur, the man whose name was on a dozen skyscrapers, would just smile weakly and retreat into himself. Callie's punishment continued, but now it felt different. She wasn't just enduring it. She was gathering information. She was waiting. The break came on a rainy Tuesday night. Callie's shift had ended late, just after midnight. The kitchen was dark, the dining room a sea of overturned chairs. She exited through the service alley, the smell of rain and old garbage thick in the air. A black town car was parked at the end of the alley, its engine idling, its lights off. Callie tensed, her hand gripping her keys. The back door opened. "Miss Sullivan, please." It was Arthur Hartford. He was sitting in the back, the car's interior light casting his face in shadow. "I'm not going to hurt you. I need to talk to you. Please." His voice was not the voice of a powerful man. It was the voice of a man at the end of his rope. Against her better judgment, Callie stepped forward, but she did not get in the car. She stood in the rain, peering in. "What do you want, Mr. Hartford?" "I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. It's unacceptable." "It's fine, I'm handling it." "That's just it," he said, leaning forward. His face was etched with a desperation that was shockingly real. "You are handling it. You're the only person I've ever seen stand up to her. That night, with the wine, you took all her power away in 30 seconds. I was just stating a fact." "You don't understand," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "Madeleine's power. It's not about money. It's about fear. It's about perception. She's built this entire world where she is the ultimate authority. And you showed everyone that the Empress has no clothes." He ran a hand through his perfect damp hair. "She wasn't always like this. When we met, she was vibrant, driven. But the money, the power, it twisted her. Or maybe it just revealed what was always there." Callie remained silent, the rain dripping from her umbrella. "She's not just cruel, Miss Sullivan. She's controlling. She has me trapped." "You're Arthur Hartford," Callie said, her voice flat. "You're one of the richest men in the city. How can you be trapped?" "In a gilded cage," he whispered. "Years ago, I made a mistake. A business deal. It was a grey area. Maybe darker than grey. I trusted her. I told her everything. And she kept the records. She has letters, documents. Enough to not just ruin me, but to send me to prison. She controls the trusts, the bank accounts. Everything is routed through her. If I leave her, if I defy her, she'll destroy me. And she'll enjoy doing it." He looked at Callie, his eyes begging. "I'm a prisoner in my own life, and she's a prisoner of her own cruelty." "This is a terrible story, Mr. Hartford," Callie said, her voice softening slightly. "But what does it have to do with me?" "Because you're not afraid of her," he said, leaning closer. "She's escalating. Her game with you. It's getting more dangerous. She's trying to find a way to really hurt you, to frame you for theft, or worse. You've become her obsession. And what do you want me to do?" "Help me," he breathed. "Help us. The documents she has on me, they're not the only ones. She has files on everyone, on the Vanderveers, the Sinclairs, on Mr. Davies. That's why they're all so terrified. She's a spider with a web of everyone's secrets. Where does she keep them? In her study. At our home, in a custom-built safe behind a painting. She's hosting her annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital in 2 weeks. It's at our penthouse. The place will be full of people. Security will be focused on the guests, not the staff. Callie's blood ran cold. You want me to? What? Work the event and rob your safe? I want you to get me the leverage I need to be free. Just my file. That's all I want. The file with my name on it. You get that for me, and I'll pay you. Enough to finish your degree. Enough to buy your own art gallery. $1 million, Callie. Cash. I'm not a thief. No, he said, a sad smile touching his lips. You're a student of history, and you're watching a tyrant rewrite it. I'm just asking you to find the primary source. Please. She's going to destroy you anyway. This is the only way to get out from under her. For both of us. He held out a small, embossed card. This is the number for the catering company she's using. They'll be expecting your call. I've told them you're a protégé of mine, looking to help. They'll hire you for the night. Callie looked at the card, then at the man. He was pathetic, yes, but he was also telling the truth. She knew he was. Madeleine was escalating. The game was becoming dangerous. I won't take your money, Mr. Hartford, Callie said, taking the card. But I hate bullies. Arthur Hartford leaned back into the shadows, a profound, shuddering sigh of relief escaping him. The painting, he said, his voice trembling. It's a small, ugly landscape of the Scottish Highlands. The combination is her birthday. 10/22/68. That's too simple. She's arrogant, Arthur said. She doesn't think anyone would ever have the nerve to try. He looked at Callie. She's never met you. The 2 weeks leading up to the gala were the most intense of Callie's life. At Aurelia, she played her part, enduring Madeleine's escalating tyranny with the same mask of polite indifference. But now, her calm had a purpose. It wasn't just survival. It was reconnaissance. She watched Madeleine. She memorized the woman's habits, her blind spots, the way she dismissed staff as furniture. It was this, Callie knew, that would be her greatest weapon. She called the catering company. As Arthur had promised, they were expecting her. She was hired for the gala. No questions asked. The night of the event, Callie arrived at the Hartford's penthouse via the service elevator. The apartment was staggering. It occupied the top 3 floors of a limestone tower overlooking Central Park. The main party was on the first floor, a ballroom-sized space filled with priceless art, shimmering chandeliers, and a sea of New York's most powerful people. Callie, dressed in a black and white uniform, blended in perfectly. She grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and entered the fray. She saw him immediately. Jasper, her fellow waiter from Aurelia. Callie, what the hell are you doing here? He whispered, grabbing her arm near the orchestra. Same as you, Jasper. Making extra money. This is her house, he hissed. It's like walking into the lion's den and offering to baste yourself. I need to find the study, Jasper, Callie said, her voice low and urgent. He stared at her. You're insane. What are you doing? Arthur asked me to be here. He needs something. A file from her safe. Jasper's eyes widened, and for a second, Callie thought he would call security. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. That woman. She cost Thomas his life, his whole life. I saw him at Costco, Callie. He was checking receipts. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. He nodded once. The study is on the 2nd floor, her private domain. There's a guard at the main staircase, but there's a staff staircase, behind the kitchen. Can you cover for you? Yeah, Jasper said, grabbing her empty tray. I'll spill a tray of drinks on Mrs. Sinclair in about 30 minutes. That should cause enough chaos for you to slip upstairs. You get 10 minutes. Tops. Go. Callie nodded, her heart pounding. She moved through the party toward the swinging doors of the massive kitchen. Inside, it was chaos. Chefs shouted, servers ran. She slipped unnoticed to the back, where a narrow, unpainted staircase led up. The second floor was silent, carpeted in thick grey wool. It was a stark contrast to the opulence below. This was the private area. She walked down a long hall, lined with abstract art. At the end, a set of double doors, the study. The door was unlocked. The room was dark, smelling of leather and old paper. The only light came from the city skyline. Callie didn't turn on a lamp. She used the flashlight on her phone. And there it was. On the far wall, just as Arthur had said. A small, ugly painting of a Scottish Highland. She lifted it. It was light. Behind it, a steel grey safe was set into the wall. Her fingers, shaking slightly, went to the keypad. 102268. She pressed the numbers. A green light flashed. Click. She pulled the heavy door open. Inside were not just files. There were stacks of cash, jewellery boxes, and rows upon rows of neat, leather-bound ledgers and folders. Her eyes scanned the labels. Vanderveer, Sinclair, Davies, M, even Jasper. And then Hartford, A. She pulled it. Her hands were trembling now. She opened it. It was exactly what Arthur had described. Photostats of letters, bank transfer statements. A signed affidavit from a man Callie didn't know. It was enough to ruin him. This was his freedom. She was about to close the folder when something else caught her eye. A different ledger. It wasn't labelled with a name. It was just labelled Foundation. Curiosity, the same instinct that made her correct the wine, made her pull it out. She opened it. It was a financial ledger, columns of numbers, and it made no sense. She saw the name of the very charity the gala was for, Hartford Children's Hospital Fund, and she saw massive donations coming in, millions. Then she saw the out columns, huge sums transferred out, not to the hospital, but to a holding company she'd never heard of. MH Private Holdings, Cayman. She flipped the page, and another. It was a pattern. Donations in, transfers out. Millions. Tens of millions. It was a sophisticated, systematic draining of the charity. This wasn't just blackmail. This was a massive, criminal fraud. She flipped to the back of the ledger, to the signatory page for the outgoing transfers, and her blood turned to ice. There were 2 signatures on every single transfer. One was Madeline Hartford. The other, clear as day, was Arthur Hartford. Callie stood in the dark study, the hum of the party downstairs feeling 1,000,000 miles away. The air was thick and cold. He's an accomplice. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The gilded cage, the mistake, the victim story. It was all a lie. A brilliant, manipulative performance. This wasn't a desperate husband trying to escape a tyrant. This was a co-conspirator, a partnership. She reread the signatures. Arthur's was firm, confident. Madeline's was a flamboyant slash. They were in this together. The entire feared wife persona. It wasn't just a personality flaw, it was a strategy. Madeline was the dragon, the public face of cruelty, the one everyone was terrified of. She kept the socialites, the partners, the victims at bay, with her petty, vicious games. Arthur, meanwhile, played the part of the henpecked, sympathetic husband, the one everyone pitied. Good cop, Bad cop. They were siphoning money from their own charity and likely countless other ventures. The blackmail files weren't Madeleine's power. They were their insurance. Callie's mind raced. Why send her? Why now? She looked at the file in her hand. Hartford, A. The blackmail file. It was real. The letters. The affidavit. But why would he want her to steal it if he was an accomplice? Unless the partnership was souring. He wanted out. But not in the way he'd said. He didn't want to be free. He wanted to take over. He couldn't just expose Madeleine, she'd expose him. But if he had his file, the one piece of evidence that gave her leverage over him, he could turn the tables. He could expose her for the fraud, paint himself as the victim, and use his own file's theft as proof that he was being set up. And who would be the thief? A disgruntled, unstable waitress with a vendetta. A waitress who, conveniently, everyone had seen Madeleine tormenting for weeks. He hadn't been admiring her strength. He'd been auditioning her for the role of his patsy. "She's going to destroy you anyway," he had said. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Callie felt a surge of cold, pure rage. She had been played. She looked at the foundation ledger in her hands. This was the real weapon. This was the one thing that implicated both of them. Arthur had sent her for his file, counting on her to be too scared and too focused to look at anything else. He had underestimated her. Again. She couldn't take the whole ledger. It was too big. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by icy resolve. She opened the ledger to the most recent page, the one showing the transfer from tonight's gala. Millions of dollars, already earmarked for the Cayman account. She laid it on the desk. Flash. She photographed the page, the signatures. Flash. She photographed the main summary page, showing the totals. Flash. She photographed the cover of Arthur's blackmail file, and then a key page from inside it. She had it. She had them. She carefully replaced the foundation ledger. She replaced the painting, but she kept Arthur's file. She paused. No, that's what he wanted. He wanted it gone. He wanted to claim it was stolen. She put the file back in the safe. She closed the heavy door, the click sounding like a gavel. She would not be his patsy. She would not be his thief. She would be his executioner. She put the painting back. She wiped her fingerprints from the frame, the safe, the doorknob. She walked out of the study, down the staff stairs, and back into the chaos of the kitchen. She grabbed a fresh tray of champagne. Jasper found her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I saw two," Callie said, her voice a stranger to her own ears. "It's all a lie, Jasper. All of it." She stepped back into the ballroom. The orchestra was playing. The laughter was loud. It all looked so fake, so brittle. She saw them. Madeleine holding court, a smug smile on her face, and Arthur, by the bar, watching the staircase, watching for her. He saw her. His eyes locked on hers. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He thought she'd done it. He thought she was his fool. Callie held his gaze. She did not nod back. She simply walked, tray in hand, toward the center of the room. Callie navigated the glittering crowd, her mind working with razor-sharp clarity. She had the evidence on her phone. But what now? Go to the police? They'd be buried in lawyers by morning. She needed to do what she did at the restaurant. She needed to expose the lie publicly. She needed to shatter the perception. She scanned the room, and she saw him. He was standing near the windows, observing the party with a look of cynical amusement. He wasn't one of the fawning socialites. He was a wolf among the sheep. Benjamin Reed, the most feared investigative reporter at the New York Times. Madeleine hated him, but she'd invited him, of course. Inviting your most public critic was the ultimate power move. It said, "Look, I am so powerful, I can even let you in, and you will find nothing." Callie changed course. She headed straight for him. "Mr. Reed? Champagne?" Reed turned, his sharp eyes taking her in. "No thanks, I'm working." "I know," Callie said, her voice low. "My name is Callie Sullivan. I'm a waitress at Aurelia." His eyebrows rose. "Aurelia? You're a long way from home." "Mrs. Hartford's private request," Callie said. "She's meticulous." "Meticulous," Reed chuckled. "That's a polite word for it." "She is." "For example," Callie said, "she's incredibly knowledgeable about wine, but she sometimes gets her facts wrong. She once confused a 47 Cheval Blanc with a 53 Margot. An easy mistake, I suppose." Reed was now giving her his full attention. He sensed a story. "Is that so?" "And she's meticulous about her charity work," Callie continued, her heart hammering. "This gala, for instance. It's raised... Let's see." She pulled her phone from her apron pocket, as if checking a fact. "Ah, yes. According to the ledger, the fund has cleared $8 million tonight." Reed's eyes narrowed. How would a waitress know that? "Because Mrs. Hartford is so meticulous," Callie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She keeps the books in her study safe. The one she and Mr. Hartford both sign off on. The one that routes 60% of all donations to a private holding company in the Caymans." She turned the phone screen to him. The photo of the ledger page, clear and damning. Reed's jaw went slack. He stared at the phone, then at Callie. "My God, is this real?" "The signature," Callie said, tapping the screen. "You'll recognize it from tonight's program. And that one? That's her husband. The victim. It seems he's in on it." "Miss Sullivan," Reed said, his voice all business. "You are either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Come with me. Now." He started to guide her toward the exit, but it was too late. "Callie." The voice cut through the music. The orchestra faltered. The party's chatter died. Madeleine Hartford was standing 10 feet away. Her face was white. She had seen Callie talking to Reed. She had seen the phone. Beside her, Arthur Hartford looked like he was about to be sick. He had seen it too. His plan, his perfect, intricate plan, was exploding. "What?" Madeleine said, her voice shaking with a rage that was no longer cold. "Do you think you are doing?" "I was just congratulating Mr. Reed," Callie said, her voice loud enough for the sudden circle of silence to hear. "On his next big story." "You," Madeleine started, stepping forward. "A story about this foundation," Callie continued, taking a step back, toward Reed. "And your creative accounting, Mrs. Hartford. You were wrong about the 47 Cheval Blanc, and you are so wrong about the Hartford Children's Hospital Fund." A collective gasp went through the room. "Security!" Arthur bellowed, lunging. But he wasn't lunging for Callie. He was lunging for Reed, for the phone. "Get her! She's a thief! She broke into my safe!" But Benjamin Reed was faster. He held the phone aloft. "Everyone, get a picture of this!" The socialites, who had lived in fear of Madeleine for years, were frozen for a half-second. Then, smartphones, which had been recording the gala, all turned. Flash, flash, flash. They weren't just taking pictures of the phone. They were taking pictures of Arthur Hartford, his face purple with rage, trying to assault a Times reporter. They were taking pictures of Madeleine Hartford, her mask of icy perfection shattered, her mouth open in a silent, horrified scream. "She's lying!" Madeleine shrieked, the sound raw and ugly. "She's a A servant. She's ridiculous!" But the word had lost its power. Callie looked at her. Not at the Queen. Not at the dragon. But at the woman. The fraud. The common criminal. "No, Mrs. Hartford," Callie said, her voice quiet, but carrying in the sudden, tomb-like silence. "You are." She didn't wait for security. She turned and, with Benjamin Reed as her escort, walked calmly out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of the Hartford dynasty behind her. The morning after the gala, the city awoke to a story that was not just news, but an earthquake. The New York Times front page was a full-bleed photograph of Arthur Hartford, his face contorted in rage, lunging at Benjamin Reed. The headline, in a bold, devastating font, read, "The Hartford Hustle. Millions in charity donations diverted to private accounts." It was a detonation. The phones at Aurelia began ringing at 7 a.m., but they weren't for reservations, they were cancellations. By 10 a.m., every single booking for the next month had vanished. Mr. Davies arrived, his face the colour of old parchment, and found a gaggle of reporters already camped outside the restaurant's polished bronze doors. He knew instantly that the file Madeline Hartford held over his head was now useless. In fact, it was a liability. By noon, he had tendered his resignation. By the end of the week, Aurelia was closed, its windows papered over, a bank seizure notice taped to the glass. For Callie, the next few months were a blur of depositions and legal offices. She was the state's star witness. The Hartford's team of high-priced lawyers tried, at first, to tear her apart. They painted her as a vindictive, fame-hungry opportunist. "So, Miss Sullivan," a sleek lawyer named Preston grilled her during one deposition, "you expect this panel to believe that you, a simple waitress, just happened to stumble upon this master plan?" Callie sat, not in an apron, but in a simple blue blazer, her hands folded. "I didn't stumble. I was pushed. Mr. Hartford recruited me himself. He tried to set me up as his patsy, to take the fall for a theft he wanted me to commit. A wild accusation. Where is your proof?" "My proof," Callie said, her voice echoing in the sterile room, "is that the file Mr. Hartford sent me to steal, the one he claimed was his blackmail, is still in the safe, right where I left it. His entire plan depended on me being a thief. He was wrong, and he was wrong about the 47 Cheval Blanc, too. He and his wife, they have a habit of getting their facts wrong when they believe no one is smart enough to check." Her testimony was a guillotine. It was precise, factual, and emotionally unassailable. When the investigators, armed with her photographs, raided the penthouse, they found everything exactly as she'd described. The foundation ledger, the rows of blackmail files, and, in its proper place, the untouched Hartford, a folder, the very existence of which proved Arthur's premeditated plot to frame her. The socialites Madeline had terrorized for years, the ones who had laughed at her jokes and feared her whispers, turned on her with the speed of sharks sensing blood. Mrs. Sinclair, the woman who had so eagerly agreed about the Arctic raspberry, was on television nightly, tearfully explaining how she had always felt something was deeply amiss and was cooperating fully with the SEC. The trial was a circus, but the verdict was a foregone conclusion. Callie, by then, had received a substantial fee from the Times for her story and the exclusive rights to her photos. She used it to pay her tuition, and then, with the rest, she put a down payment on a small, foreclosed bistro in the West Village. She didn't bother to attend the sentencing. She heard about it from Jasper. 6 months had passed since the night of the gala. The new space was warm, smelling of fresh paint, exposed brick, and sawdust. Callie was on a stepladder, painting a name in delicate gold leaf on the front window. The Gilded Sparrow. Jasper, who she had hired as her manager, walked in, wiping his feet and holding a cardboard box of bar glasses. "Heard the news, boss?" he asked, setting the box down. "I've been breathing paint fumes for 8 hours, Jasper." "What news?" He tapped his phone, and a local news anchor's voice filled the small room. A stunning fall from grace. Madeline and Arthur Hartford, looking gaunt, were sentenced today by Judge Maria Esposito. Citing the staggering, sociopathic greed of their crimes, particularly the theft from their own children's hospital fund, she sentenced them both to the maximum, 15 years in a federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 10. All assets have been seized. Jasper turned it off. The small restaurant was quiet. 15 years, Callie said, her hand still holding the paintbrush. Hard karma, Jasper said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. He began unpacking the glasses, holding one up to the light. She tormented people because she thought it was a sport. She destroyed Thomas's career over a date. "You know, I heard he's back in the city. After your testimony cleared his name in the press, he got a new offer. Head sommelier at the Carlyle." Callie smiled, a real tired smile. "That's good. That's really good." "Yeah," Jasper said. "It is." He looked at the window. "The Gilded Sparrow? I like it. A bit on the nose, no?" "It was a gilded cage, Jasper," Callie said, climbing down the ladder. "That's what Arthur called his life. But sparrows aren't meant to be in cages. They're common, they're everywhere, and they're free. I like that." She looked around the room. It was hers. The menu, tacked to the wall, was simple, honest food. The wine list, curated by her father, who she'd flown in from his small town, featured no mythical 47 vintages, but rather small, affordable, honest vineyards. The television on the bar, which Jasper had just installed, flickered back to life with the breaking news segment. The camera zoomed in on Madeline's face as she was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. The mask was gone. The icy, controlled perfection that had terrified an entire city had shattered. This was not a dragon. This was not a queen. It was a pale, terrified woman, her eyes wide and blank, her mouth a thin, trembling line. The Queen of New York had been reduced to just another inmate number. Callie thought back to the last word Madeline had ever shrieked at her. Ridiculous. She had been right. The whole thing, the power, the fear, the performance, it was ridiculous. It was a grand, hollow stage. And the Hartfords had been so busy playing their parts, they forgot it was all a lie. All it took was one person who refused to applaud. "Boss," Jasper called, snapping her out of her thoughts. "The new espresso machine just got here. Where do you want it?" Callie grabbed a rag, wiped the paint from her hands, and turned away from the television. "Put it right on the bar," she said, a sense of deep, settled calm filling her. "I want everyone to be able to see it." And that's the story of how a single glass of wine and one waitress who refused to be afraid brought down an empire. It just goes to show that the people who seem the most powerful, the ones who rule by fear, are often standing on the most fragile foundations. All it takes is one person brave enough to point out the crack. Madeline and Arthur Hartford learned that the hard way. They thought they were untouchable, but they forgot that everyone, no matter how high up, eventually has to pay the check. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this tale of drama and sweet karma, please don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Please share this video with anyone else who loves a story where the bully finally gets what they deserve. We'll see you in the next one.